The fluorescent lights of the Chevron station buzzed overhead as Sarah filled her Harley's tank, her leather jacket gleaming under the harsh glare. She'd stopped here 1,000 times in the past 5 years, just another suburban mom picking up milk and gas. But tonight was different. Tonight, a woman with club patches and cold eyes was watching her every move. "Hi, ma'am. My dad has a bike just like yours." The 7-year-old boy's innocent words cut through the evening air like a knife. The Hells Angels woman's head snapped up, studying Sarah's face with sudden intensity. Recognition dawned slowly, then all at once. "It all makes sense now," the woman whispered, her hand moving toward her phone. Sarah's blood turned to ice. After 15 years of hiding, of building a perfect life with her husband and children, her past had finally caught up. The witness protection program had promised her safety, but promises meant nothing when your former life wore leather and rode in packs. Her old crew didn't forgive, they never forgot. How long did she have before they came for her family? Sarah forced her hand to remain steady as she replaced the gas cap, though every instinct screamed at her to run. The woman across the pumps hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked. The skull and wings patch on her vest caught the light, the same emblem Sarah had once worn with deadly pride. The little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, can we get ice cream?" "Not tonight, honey," the mother replied, oblivious to the silent standoff happening 20 feet away. She herded her son toward the convenience store, leaving Sarah alone with her nightmare. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. The woman was Viper, Rachel Torino, though she looked harder now, weathered by 15 more years of the life Sarah had abandoned. Viper had been her closest friend once, her sister in the Diablos MC. They'd run drugs together, fought rival gangs side by side, shared secrets that could bury them both. Until the night Sarah chose saving innocent lives over club loyalty. The federal prosecutor had called her a hero. The Diablos had called her a traitor. Both were right. Viper's phone buzzed to life. Sarah caught fragments of the conversation carried on the desert wind. "Yeah, it's her. Positive ID. Phoenix, off Highway 60. Sarah swung her leg over the Harley and started the engine, but Viper was already moving. The woman approached with the casual confidence of someone who'd never backed down from anything. "Well, well. Scarlet fucking Phoenix rises from the ashes." Viper's voice carried the rasp of too many cigarettes and too much whiskey. "Though I guess you go by something else these days. Something more maternal?" Sarah kept her helmet in her lap, her hands free. Old habits. "I don't know what you're talking about." Viper circled the bike slowly, taking in details. Suburban haircut, wedding ring, minivan keys hanging off your belt. You've really committed to the bit, haven't you? Does your husband know he married a killer? The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah's past wasn't just catching up. It was threatening to devour everything she'd built. Her daughter Emma's soccer games, her son Michael's piano recitals, the quiet Sunday mornings with coffee and crossword puzzles. Tom didn't know about the bodies, about the deals gone wrong, about the federal task force she'd helped bring down the most violent motorcycle gang in the Southwest. "What do you want?" Sarah's voice stayed level, but her heart hammered against her ribs. Viper smiled, but it never reached her eyes. "Justice, closure. Maybe just to see you bleed a little before the boys get here." She checked her phone. "They're excited to see you, particularly Razor. You remember Razor, don't you? Your old boyfriend's still doing 25 to life because of your testimony." Sarah's mind calculated distances, escape routes, how long it would take to get home and get Tom and the kids somewhere safe. The marshals had contingency plans, but those required advance warning. She had minutes, maybe less. "I was protecting innocent people." "You were protecting yourself." Viper's hand moved to her waist, where Sarah glimpsed the handle of a knife. 3 families died in that warehouse fire because you tipped off the feds. 3 families the Diablos were supposed to save. The Diablos were selling heroin to kids. I saw the bodies piling up. You saw a chance to cut a deal. Viper's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and smiled wider. "They're 10 minutes out. Amazing how fast boys can move when they're motivated." Sarah kick-started the Harley. The engine's roar echoed off the gas station's canopy, drawing stares from other customers. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that death had just pulled into their quiet corner of suburbia. "This isn't over," Viper called as Sarah peeled out of the lot. But Sarah already knew that. It had never been over. She'd just been living on borrowed time, and now the clock had finally run out. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Tom. Home was 12 minutes away. She prayed that would be enough. The gas pump clicked off with mechanical finality, but Sarah's hand remained frozen on the handle. Through the fingerprint-smudged window of the convenience store, she could see the blonde woman moving between the aisles, her movements deliberate and unhurried. 20 years had changed them both. Softened edges, added lines around the eyes, streaked hair with silver, but some things ran deeper than time could touch. The way Diane held her left shoulder slightly higher than her right, the habit of touching her collarbone when she was thinking, the predatory grace that made other people unconsciously step aside without knowing why. "Mommy?" Emma's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you okay?" Sarah blinked, realizing she'd been standing motionless for nearly a minute. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired from the drive." She replaced the gas nozzle with hands that betrayed nothing of the earthquake happening beneath her skin. Her mind raced through calculations. They were still 3 hours from Portland. She could get back on the interstate, take the long way around, avoid any chance of another encounter. But Emma needed to use the bathroom, and their water bottles were empty. More importantly, running would mean Diane had seen her too. And if Diane recognized her, changing routes now would only confirm what they both suspected. The bell above the convenience store door chimed as Sarah pushed inside, Emma's small hand warm and trusting in hers. The fluorescent lights cast everything in harsh relief, the rows of candy and chips, the coffee station with its perpetually brewing pots, the tired-looking clerk behind bulletproof glass. Diane stood at the refrigerated section, studying energy drinks with the same focus she'd once applied to surveillance photos. She wore expensive jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly grocery budget. Success suited her, but then it always had. "Bathroom's in the back, baby," Sarah murmured to Emma, who scampered off without hesitation. The trust of children, so absolute, so dangerous. Sarah selected 2 bottles of water and a bag of pretzels, keeping her movements casual as she approached the counter. From her peripheral vision, she could see Diane hadn't moved, waiting, testing. The clerk, a teenager with aggressive acne and dead eyes, rang up her purchases without looking at her face. Sarah paid in cash, a habit that had served her well in this new life, and was turning to leave when Diane's voice cut through the hum of refrigeration units. "Beautiful daughter you have there." Sarah's blood crystallized. She turned slowly, meeting those pale green eyes that had once looked at her with something that might have been love, if either of them had known what that word really meant back then. "Thank you." Her voice came out steady, neutral. "Kids grow up so fast." "They do." Diane's smile was perfect, warm, maternal, completely artificial. "Mine are teenagers now. Sometimes I miss when they were small enough to be impressed by motorcycles." The word hung between them like a loaded gun. Sarah felt the familiar weight of the Glock in her purse, a precaution she'd hoped never to need in this life. Her fingers didn't move toward it, but the awareness was there, sharp and ready. "Emma loves anything with wheels," Sarah replied carefully. "Cars, trucks, bicycles. She's not particular." "Smart girl. It's good to keep your options open." Diane selected a Red Bull and closed the refrigerator door with deliberate care. You never know when you might need to change direction quickly. Emma emerged from the bathroom, chattering about the funny pictures someone had drawn on the walls. She bounced up to Sarah, completely oblivious to the tension crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. "Can we get gummy bears?" she asked, tugging on Sarah's sleeve. "We have snacks in the car, remember?" Sarah's hand found Emma's shoulder, a protective gesture that felt entirely natural now. "We should get going." "Long drive ahead?" Diane asked conversationally. "Not too bad," Sarah guided Emma toward the door, every instinct screaming at her to move faster while training kept her pace measured and calm. "Take care. You too," Diane's voice followed them. "Drive safely. You never know what you might run into on the road." The June heat hit them like a wall as they stepped outside, but Sarah felt cold down to her bones. She buckled Emma into her car seat with hands that wanted to shake, double-checking the straps even though her daughter was perfectly capable of managing them herself. "Mummy, you're being weird," Emma observed with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Sorry, sweetheart. Just want to make sure you're safe." As Sarah pulled out of the gas station, she caught a glimpse of Diane in her rearview mirror, standing in the doorway of the convenience store, phone pressed to her ear, making a call that would set wheels in motion, wheels that had been still for 20 years but were now beginning to turn again. The interstate stretched ahead, but Sarah knew with cold certainty that no amount of distance would be far enough now. The drive home felt endless. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white, and every few seconds she glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights following them through the darkening streets. Emma had fallen asleep in her car seat, her small hands still clutching the toy motorcycle that had started everything. Sarah pulled into their driveway and sat for a moment in the silence, her heart still hammering against her ribs. The modest two-story house, with its cheerful yellow shutters and carefully tended garden, looked exactly the same as when they'd left that morning. But somehow, everything felt different now. Contaminated. The life she'd built here, the safety she'd created for Emma, it all felt as fragile as tissue paper. She carried Emma inside, the little girl stirring only briefly as Sarah tucked her into bed. In the hallway, family photos lined the walls, Emma's first steps, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, a life documented in careful detail, each moment a deliberate choice to build something normal and good. Sarah's reflection caught in the hallway mirror, and for a split second she saw someone else looking back, a younger woman with different hair, different clothes, different dreams, a woman who'd made choices that led to running, always running. In the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of wine with shaking hands and stared out the window at the quiet suburban street. Mrs. Henderson was walking her ancient golden retriever. The Patels were bringing in their garbage cans. Tuesday night routines, predictable and safe, everything she'd wanted when she'd chosen this place, this life. The phone rang, making her jump. The caller ID showed her neighbor Janet's number. "Hey, just wanted to check on you," Janet's familiar voice said. "I saw you come home and you looked a little rattled. Everything okay?" Sarah forced lightness into her voice. "Just tired. Long day at the office, you know how it is. Well, don't forget about the PTA meeting Thursday. We're still counting on you for the fundraiser committee." "Of course. I'll be there." After hanging up, Sarah felt the weight of how deeply embedded she'd become in this community. The fundraiser committee, Emma's school, the neighbors who cared enough to check on her. It wasn't just her life anymore, it was Emma's too. Her daughter had friends here, a school she loved, a sense of belonging that Sarah had never had at that age. She opened her laptop and found herself doing something she'd sworn she'd never do, searching. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard before typing Phoenix motorcycle accident 2019. The search results filled her screen. Local news articles, police reports, obituaries. She scrolled through them with growing dread, looking for any mention of investigations still ongoing, any suggestion that the past wasn't as buried as she'd hoped. Most of the coverage focused on the victim, Marcus Rodriguez, a 26-year-old mechanic with a young family. There was his photo, dark eyes, easy smile, completely unaware that his Saturday evening ride would be his last. Sarah's throat tightened as she read about his pregnant wife, his 2-year-old son, the dreams that died with him on that desert highway. She found what she was looking for in a smaller article dated 6 months after the accident. Rodriguez family settles civil suit in fatal motorcycle crash. The brief piece mentioned an undisclosed settlement with the other driver whose identity remained sealed in the court records. The case was closed, officially forgotten by everyone except the people who lived with its consequences every day. But Valerie's presence at the gas station changed everything. If she was here, in this town, it couldn't be a coincidence. Sarah tried to remember everything about their brief encounter. The woman's clothes, her car, whether she'd seemed to be looking for something or someone. The way she'd stared at Emma suggested she knew exactly who they were. Sarah closed the laptop and walked to Emma's room, standing in the doorway watching her daughter sleep. Emma's face was peaceful, innocent, untouched by the weight of secrets that pressed down on Sarah like a physical force. In the morning, Emma would wake up and want breakfast and ask about her spelling test, and Sarah would have to pretend that their world hadn't shifted on its axis in a gas station parking lot. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she'd hoped never to use again. Detective Morrison had been kind during the investigation, professional but understanding. He'd been the one to suggest that sometimes a fresh start was the best thing for everyone involved, especially when a child was concerned. Her finger hovered over his name. One call could tell her whether Valerie's appearance was part of something larger, whether the careful life she'd built was about to crumble. But making that call would also mean admitting that the past had found her, and once she opened that door, there might be no closing it again. The drive home felt endless. Sarah's hands trembled against the steering wheel as she navigated the familiar streets that suddenly seemed foreign and threatening. Every motorcycle that passed made her heart skip. Every shadow in her rearview mirror could be danger following her home. "Mummy, you're driving really slow," Emma observed from the back seat, her voice cutting through Sarah's spiraling thoughts. "Just being careful, sweetheart." Sarah forced her voice to remain steady, but her eyes kept darting to the mirrors. The woman from the gas station, Lisa she'd called herself, had let them go. But Sarah knew better than to trust that momentary mercy. People like Lisa didn't forget, and they certainly didn't forgive. The modest ranch house on Maple Street had been their sanctuary for 3 years. Sarah had chosen it specifically for its quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where people minded their own business and children rode bikes until sunset. Now, as she pulled into the driveway, it felt exposed and vulnerable. "Can I watch cartoons?" Emma asked as they entered through the garage. "Of course, baby. Whatever you want." Sarah's mind was already racing ahead, cataloging what needed to be done. How much cash did they have? Which documents were essential? How quickly could she withdraw Emma from school without raising suspicions? As Emma settled in front of the television, Sarah retreated to her bedroom and pulled out the emergency bag she'd hoped never to use again. It had been 3 years since she'd last checked its contents, fake IDs that might still work, credit cards linked to accounts in different names, and $10,000 in cash. The tools of someone who'd learned to disappear. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. We should talk. You know why. Riverside Park, 1 hour. Come alone." Sarah stared at the message until the words blurred. She'd been naive to think a single conversation would end this. Lisa wanted something: money, silence, or revenge. Maybe all three. The next hour crawled by in agonizing slow motion. Sarah tried to act normal for Emma's sake, making grilled cheese sandwiches she couldn't eat and responding to her daughter's chatter about school friends and playground drama. Normal problems of a normal child who had no idea her mother had once been someone else entirely. At 6:30, Sarah called Mrs. Peterson next door. "I have an emergency at work," she lied smoothly. "Could you possibly watch Emma for a couple of hours?" Mrs. Peterson, a retired teacher who doted on Emma, agreed immediately. Within 20 minutes, Emma was settled at the neighbor's kitchen table with homework and promises of homemade cookies. Riverside Park after dark was a different world. The cheerful playground where Sarah had pushed Emma on swings transformed into a maze of shadows and potential threats. She found Lisa sitting on a bench near the duck pond, smoking a cigarette in the autumn chill. "You came," Lisa said without turning around. "Smart. What do you want?" Sarah remained standing, ready to run if necessary. "Sit down, Jenny. Or do you prefer Sarah now?" Lisa's voice carried the same hard edge Sarah remembered from 15 years ago. "Relax. If I wanted to hurt you, you'd already be hurt." Against her better judgment, Sarah sat on the far end of the bench. I'm not that person anymore. No? Lisa turned to study her face. Because the Jenny I knew would have been out of town by now. The fact that you're still here tells me you've got something worth staying for. Let me guess. The little girl? Sarah's silence was answer enough. She's cute, Lisa continued. Looks like you. How old? 7, 8? Don't. The word came out sharper than Sarah intended. Lisa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. There she is. There's the Jenny I remember. That life is over. I have nothing left from back then. You have me. Lisa flicked her cigarette into the pond. And I have problems, Jenny. The kind of problems that require solutions. The kind you used to be very good at providing. Sarah felt the familiar cold settle in her stomach. I don't do that anymore. Maybe not. But you remember how, don't you? It's not something you forget. Lisa leaned closer. I need one job, one simple job, and then we're even. You disappear back into your little suburban dream, and I forget I ever saw you. And if I refuse, then I make some phone calls. Amazing how many people from the old neighborhood would love to know where Jenny Morrison ended up. Lisa stood up, adjusting her leather jacket. You've got 48 hours to decide. I'll be in touch. Sarah watched her walk away, disappearing into the shadows between the streetlights. The park felt impossibly quiet afterward, just the distant hum of traffic and the gentle lapping of water against the pond's edge. She sat there for a long time, staring at the cigarette butt floating among the lily pads, trying to figure out how to save the life she'd built without becoming the person she'd fought so hard to leave behind. The drive back to her apartment felt endless. Sarah's hands trembled against the steering wheel as she replayed every second of the encounter at the gas station. The way recognition had dawned in that woman's eyes, slow and terrifying, like watching a predator realize it had found prey. Motorcycle, mama. How could she have been so careless? 15 years of building this life, 15 years of careful construction, and it could all crumble because of a child's innocent observation and a stranger's sharp memory. Sarah pulled into her parking spot and sat in the silence, her engine ticking as it cooled. Through her windshield she could see the warm glow of her living room window on the 3rd floor. David would be inside, probably grading papers at the kitchen table while Emma did homework nearby. Normal, safe, everything she'd fought so hard to create. She climbed the stairs slowly, her legs heavy with exhaustion and dread. The familiar sounds of her evening routine drifted through the door, David's gentle voice helping Emma with math, the distant murmur of the news playing in the background. She stood in the hallway for a long moment, key in hand, trying to summon the strength to slip back into the role of wife and mother. Mom! Emma bounded toward her the moment she stepped inside. Daddy made spaghetti, and I only got sauce on my shirt twice, which is practically a record. Sarah managed a smile, though it felt like her face might crack from the effort. That is definitely a record. She kissed the top of Emma's head, breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter's strawberry shampoo. This was real. This was what mattered. David appeared in the kitchen doorway, tea towel in hand. You're later than usual. Everything okay at the hospital? The lie came so easily it frightened her. Emergency surgery ran long. Dr. Martinez needed an extra pair of hands. She hung her jacket on the hook by the door, noting how her hands had finally stopped shaking. There's a plate in the fridge if you're hungry. David studied her face with the quiet attention that had drawn her to him all those years ago. You look tired. Just a long day. She moved past him toward the kitchen, needing something to do with her hands. As she reheated her dinner, she could feel his eyes on her, could sense the questions he was too considerate to ask. Emma chattered about her day, while Sarah picked at her spaghetti, the food tasting like cardboard in her mouth. She made the appropriate responses, asked the right questions, played her part perfectly, but underneath the domestic normalcy, her mind raced. Who was that woman? The face had seemed familiar, but Sarah couldn't place it. Someone from the old days, clearly, but which old days? The early years when she'd first started running with the serpents, or later during the darker period she tried never to think about. After Emma was tucked into bed with a story and multiple kisses, Sarah found herself standing at her bedroom window, staring down at the parking lot. Every set of headlights that swept across the pavement made her pulse spike. Every shadow between the cars could be hiding a threat. "Sarah." David's voice was gentle but insistent. "What's really going on?" She turned to find him watching her from the doorway, his expression a mixture of concern and something that might have been suspicion. In 15 years of marriage, she'd never been good at hiding things from him. It was both a blessing and a curse. "I saw someone today," she said carefully. "Someone I used to know." "From nursing school?" The assumption stung, another reminder of how thoroughly she'd erased her past. "From before that, from when I was younger." David moved closer, and she could see him processing this information. He knew almost nothing about her life before they'd met at that coffee shop near the university. She'd told him her parents were dead, that she'd grown up in foster care, that she preferred to focus on the future rather than dwell on an unhappy past. He'd accepted it all with the kind of quiet understanding that had made her fall in love with him. Was it difficult, seeing them? Such a simple question, but how could she possibly answer it truthfully? How could she explain that a chance encounter might destroy everything they'd built together, that the woman she'd been before they met was someone he wouldn't recognize, someone he might not be able to love? "Yes," she whispered. It was difficult. David crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, and for a moment she let herself sink into his warmth. But even as he held her, even as he murmured reassurances about the past being the past, Sarah's mind was already working ahead. She needed to find out who that woman was and what she wanted. She needed to protect her family, even if it meant becoming someone she'd sworn she'd never be again. The police station buzzed with its usual afternoon chaos, but Detective Ray Hernandez barely noticed the commotion around him as he stared at the files spread across his desk. What had started as a routine missing person case was beginning to feel like something else entirely. Sarah Chen had been reported missing by her employer when she failed to show up for her shift at the diner. No big deal, really. People skipped work all the time. But it was the details that nagged at him. Her car, abandoned at Murphy's gas station with the keys still in the ignition and her purse on the passenger seat. Her daughter Emma, found wandering the parking lot alone, confused and scared. Ray rubbed his temples, fighting off the caffeine headache that had been building since his third cup of coffee. Emma's statement played on repeat in his mind. The little girl had been surprisingly articulate for a 5-year-old, but her story felt incomplete, like pieces of a puzzle scattered across different rooms. "Mama talked to the motorcycle lady," Emma had told the social worker. "They knew each other from before I was born. Mama got really quiet after that." The motorcycle lady. Ray had already pulled the security footage from Murphy's, but the angle was frustrating. You could see Sarah's car clearly, and a figure approaching it, but the person's face was obscured by the shadow of the overhang. What he could make out was a black leather jacket and dark hair. The motorcycle Emma mentioned wasn't visible in any of the camera's range. He picked up Sarah's personnel file from the diner. Clean record, reliable employee for the past 4 years. But before that, nothing. It was as if Sarah Chen had materialized out of thin air when Emma was 6 months old. No previous address, no employment history, no references except for a landlord who remembered her paying 6 months' rent in cash up front. Ray's partner, Detective Maria Santos, dropped into the chair across from him with her own cup of coffee and a bag of vending machine chips. "Anything new on the gas station, woman?" Still a ghost. Ray turned his monitor toward her, showing a grainy still from the security footage. "I ran this through facial recognition, but the image quality is garbage. Could be anyone." Maria leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "What about the motorcycle? Any description besides black and shiny from the kid?" "Working on it. I've got calls out to all the local bike shops, but you know how that goes. Half these guys don't keep proper records, especially for used sales or repairs." Ray flipped through his notes. "There's something else, though. I talked to the other employees at the diner this morning. According to them, Sarah was always looking over her shoulder. Never talked about her past, never mentioned family or friends from before she moved here. Running from something, that's what I'm thinking. Question is, did it finally catch up to her? Maria popped a chip in her mouth, considering. Could be an abusive ex. Maybe the motorcycle woman was sent to find her, or maybe it was the ex herself. Sarah panics, takes off, leaves the kid behind in the confusion. Ray had considered that possibility, but something about it didn't sit right. Emma said they talked like they knew each other well, not like a stranger tracking someone down, but like old friends or old enemies. The phone on Ray's desk rang, interrupting his thoughts. The caller ID showed the county forensics lab. Hernandez, he answered. Detective, it's Kim Wong from the lab. I've got some preliminary results on that car you brought in yesterday. Ray grabbed a pen. What do you have? Fingerprints are mostly the victim's and the child's, as expected. But we found something interesting in the driver's seat. Hair fibers that don't match either of them. Dark brown, approximately shoulder length, with traces of motor oil. Motor oil? Yeah, like someone who works on motorcycles regularly. And there's something else. We found trace amounts of a specific type of leather conditioner on the door handle. High-end stuff, the kind serious bikers use on expensive jackets. Ray felt his pulse quicken. How long would these traces last? Given the weather conditions and the fact that the car was exposed overnight, they're fresh, probably left there within hours of when you found the vehicle. After hanging up, Ray turned back to Maria. The motorcycle woman definitely had contact with Sarah's car. Physical contact, so not just a random encounter. Ray stood up, reaching for his jacket. I'm going back to Murphy's. Sometimes people remember things better the second time around, especially when they realize it might be important. Maria gathered her things. Want company? Always. Ray paused at his desk, looking one more time at the photo of Sarah Chen clipped to the file, a woman with kind eyes and a nervous smile, the kind of person who seemed to apologize for taking up space in the world. You know what bothers me most about this case? What's that? Emma said her mother got quiet after talking to this woman. Not scared, not angry. Quiet. Like she was thinking about something she hadn't thought about in a long time. They headed toward the exit, but Ray's mind was already racing ahead, trying to piece together the fragments of a story that seemed to stretch much further back than a simple disappearance. Sarah's hands trembled as she unlocked her front door, the familiar weight of her house keys feeling foreign against her palm. The drive home had passed in a blur of stop signs and traffic lights, her mind replaying every moment of the encounter at the gas station. Maya's face, older now but unmistakable, haunted every blink. She stepped inside and leaned against the closed door, listening to the silence that filled her carefully constructed sanctuary. Everything here represented the life she'd built from nothing. The cream-colored walls she'd painted herself, the family photos arranged on the mantel, the children's artwork magneted to the refrigerator. Normal, safe, a world away from who she used to be. Mom, Emma's voice drifted from the living room. Why are you standing by the door like that? Sarah forced herself to move, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter with practiced normalcy. Just tired, sweetheart. How was your afternoon with Dad? Good. We worked on my science project. Emma appeared in the doorway, her dark hair messy from lying on the carpet. Dad said to tell you he'll pick us up Friday at 6 for dinner. The mention of David sent another spike of anxiety through Sarah's chest. Their divorce had been amicable, built on the foundation of growing apart rather than any explosive revelation. He knew nothing about her life before she'd arrived in town 12 years ago, pregnant and alone. She'd crafted her history carefully, a failed relationship, a need for a fresh start, family back east who weren't in the picture. Simple, believable, safe, but Maya's presence changed everything. Where's your brother? Sarah asked, opening the refrigerator to give her hands something to do. Upstairs playing video games. Can I have a snack? Sarah pulled out apple slices and peanut butter, her movements automatic while her mind raced. Maya had recognized her. There was no mistaking the shock in those familiar green eyes, the way her face had drained of color. But what did she want? Why was she here, in this small town where Sarah had thought she could disappear forever. The sound of a motorcycle engine rumbling past the house made Sarah freeze, the apple slice slipping from her fingers to clatter on the floor. Emma looked at her strangely. "Mom, you okay?" "Fine." Sarah's voice came out sharper than intended. She picked up the apple slice, rinsing it in the sink while watching the street through the kitchen window. Empty. Just Mrs. Henderson walking her dog, and the afternoon shadows growing longer across the pavement. Her phone buzzed against the counter. "Unknown number. We need to talk. M." The simple message sent ice through Sarah's veins. Maya had her number. That meant she'd been looking, searching. This wasn't a coincidence. Emma was watching her with those perceptive 8-year-old eyes that missed nothing. "Who's texting you?" "Work." The lie came easily, but it tasted bitter. She'd sworn when Emma was born that she would never lie to her children, would never put them in danger the way she'd been endangered. Yet here she was, both lying and potentially bringing danger right to their doorstep. Sarah deleted the message and powered off her phone. Whatever Maya wanted, it could wait. She needed time to think, to plan. The woman she used to be would have already been packing, already running. But that woman didn't have children who needed stability, who trusted her completely. "Can we make cookies tonight?" Emma asked, settling at the kitchen table with her snack. "The chocolate chip ones with the sea salt on top?" "Of course." Sarah managed to smile, though her heart was pounding. This was what mattered. This moment, this child, this life she'd built. Maya belonged to a different time, a different person. Sarah Martinez, single mother and insurance adjuster, had nothing to do with the girl who'd run with Maya Reeves 15 years ago. But even as she told herself this, she knew it wasn't true. The past didn't stay buried just because you wanted it to. It clawed its way to the surface eventually, dirty and demanding and impossible to ignore. The front door opened and 10-year-old Alex bounded in, all energy and grass stains. "Mom, can Jake come over tomorrow? His mom said it's okay if you say yes." "We'll see." Sarah pulled him into a hug, breathing in the scent of sunshine and childhood that clung to his hair. "Go wash your hands for snack." As her children chattered about school and friends and the thousand small concerns that made up their world, Sarah felt the weight of her secrets pressing down like a physical force. She'd protected them for 10 years by being nobody, by living quietly and carefully in the space between her old life and this one. Now Maya was here, and that careful balance was crumbling. Sarah just had to figure out what Maya wanted before everything she'd built came crashing down around them. The drive back to town felt endless. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white, and every few seconds she glanced in the rearview mirror, checking for headlights that might be following too closely. The highway stretched ahead like a black ribbon, illuminated only by her headlights cutting through the darkness. "Mom, you're driving really slow," Emma observed from the back seat, her voice cutting through the tense silence. Sarah realized she'd been unconsciously reducing her speed, as if going slower could somehow delay whatever was coming. "Just being careful, sweetheart." But careful wouldn't be enough. Not anymore. When they finally pulled into their driveway, Sarah sat in the car for a moment, staring at the house that had been their sanctuary for the past 3 years. The white picket fence, the flower boxes she'd painted last spring, the tire swing hanging from the old oak tree, all of it suddenly felt fragile, like a stage set that could be dismantled at any moment. "Can I watch TV before bed?" Emma asked, already unbuckling her seatbelt. "Just for a little while." Inside, Sarah went through the motions of their evening routine while her mind raced. She made Emma a snack, helped her with the homework she'd forgotten about, and settled her in front of the television with a promise of 30 more minutes before bedtime. All the while, she kept glancing toward the windows, checking the locks, listening for sounds that didn't belong. When Emma was finally asleep, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. She pulled out her phone and stared at it, thumb hovering over the contacts. There was only one person she could call, but making that call would cross a line she'd hoped never to approach again. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar gravelly voice answered. Well, I'll be damned. Luna Martinez. Don't use that name. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Old habits. It's been what, 5 years? 6? Marcus, I need your help. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Marcus Chen had been her handler during those final months before she'd disappeared into witness protection. He'd been the one to coordinate her new identity, her relocation, her transformation from Luna Martinez into Sarah Williams. He'd also been the one to warn her that the protection was only as good as her ability to stay hidden. "Talk to me," he said, his tone shifting to business. "Someone recognized me today. From before. You sure?" Sarah closed her eyes, seeing again the way the woman's face had changed, the recognition dawning like a slow sunrise. Positive. She knew exactly who I was. "Give me details." Sarah recounted the encounter at the gas station, describing the woman as best she could remember. Marcus listened without interruption, and she could hear him typing in the background. "The kid mentioned motorcycles, you said?" "Yes. And this woman, she had that look. You know the one." Marcus did know. There was a hardness that came from living on the wrong side of the law, a way of carrying oneself that was difficult to shake even years later. Sarah had worked hard to soften her own edges, to become the kind of person who belonged in PTA meetings and neighborhood barbecues. "I'll run some searches, see what I can find. In the meantime, you need to be smart about this. Any other unusual activity? Strange calls, people asking questions?" "No, nothing like that." "Keep it that way. Don't change your routine too dramatically. That'll just draw attention. But be aware, very aware." Sarah felt tears threatening. "Marcus, I can't go back. Emma's whole life is here. She has friends, school, stability. She doesn't even remember our old life. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Maybe this woman doesn't want any trouble. Maybe she's moved on just like you have." But they both knew that was unlikely. People from their old world didn't usually surface just to exchange pleasantries. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "Word's been floating around lately that some old cases are being reopened. Federal task force, new technology, cold cases getting hot again. Ring any bells?" Sarah's blood went cold. The trial that had put her in witness protection had sent several high-ranking members of the Delgado organization to prison, but the conviction had hinged largely on her testimony. If new evidence was surfacing, if cases were being reopened. "How long do I have?" she asked. "To do what?" "To decide whether to run again." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, running isn't always the answer. Sometimes you have to stand and fight." After they hung up, Sarah walked through her house, looking at the life she'd built. Family photos on the mantel, Emma's artwork on the refrigerator, the cozy reading nook by the window, where they spent Sunday mornings together. Everything she'd fought so hard to create, all of it balanced on the knife's edge of her past. Outside, a car drove slowly past her house, its headlights sweeping across her living room wall before disappearing into the night. The fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead as Sarah sat in the hard plastic chair, her hands trembling in her lap. Detective Martinez had been kind enough to offer her coffee, but the styrofoam cup sat untouched, growing cold as she stared at the interview room's beige walls. Every few minutes she glanced at the clock, watching the hands move with agonizing slowness. 24 hours. That's how long Emma had been missing. "Mrs. Coleman, I need you to look at something." He slid a grainy security photo toward her. The image showed a woman in dark clothing near a motorcycle, her face partially obscured by shadow. This was taken from the gas station across from Emma's school yesterday afternoon. Sarah's breath caught. Even with the poor quality, she recognized the stance, the way the woman held her shoulders. "That's her," she whispered. "That's Diana Reeves." Martinez nodded grimly. "We ran the plates on the bike. Stolen 3 days ago from a parking garage downtown. Professional job. Whoever took it knew what they were doing." "She always was good with motorcycles," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "Back when I knew her before. Tell me about your relationship with MS Reeves." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 15 years pressing down on her chest. She had rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind, But sitting here now, with Emma's life hanging in the balance, the words felt like shards of glass in her throat. "We were partners," she began slowly, "in Chicago. We ran cons together. Nothing violent, just small-time stuff. Credit card fraud, fake identities, insurance scams. I was young and stupid and thought I was in love." Martinez wrote steadily, his pen scratching against the notepad. What changed? Diana got greedy. She wanted to move up to bigger scores, more dangerous territory. There was this job she was planning, something involving a drug dealer's stash house. I told her I was out, that I wanted to go straight. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. She didn't take it well. Define, didn't take it well. The memory hit Sarah like a physical blow. She could still smell the smoke, still hear the sirens wailing in the distance. She burned down my apartment. Everything I owned, gone. Photos, clothes, my grandmother's jewelry. She left a note saying that if I couldn't be trusted to stay loyal, I couldn't be trusted at all. Martinez looked up from his notes. "Did you file a police report?" Sarah shook her head. I was terrified. Diana knew people, dangerous people, and I had warrants out anyway from some of our earlier jobs. I ran. Changed my name, moved as far away as I could get, started over. But she found you. Apparently. Sarah's voice cracked. I should have known she'd never let it go. Diana doesn't forgive, and she doesn't forget. She probably spent years looking for me. The detective leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "Mrs. Coleman, or should I say Mrs. Sarah Mackenzie, why didn't you tell us about this history immediately?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Sarah felt the familiar urge to run, to disappear again, but Emma's face flashed in her mind. Her daughter needed her to be brave, to finally face the truth she had been hiding for so long. "Because I was afraid you'd think I deserved this," she said quietly. "That my past mistakes somehow justified what's happening to my daughter. Where do you think she's taken Emma?" Sarah had been asking herself the same question all night. Diana was smart, methodical. She wouldn't choose a location randomly, somewhere with meaning, Sarah said finally. Diana's always been dramatic. She'd want this to feel poetic somehow. Martinez's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then stood quickly. "We need to continue this in a minute. Stay here." As the door closed behind him, Sarah was left alone with the security photo. She picked it up, studying Diana's shadowy figure. Even after all these years, she could read the tension in the woman's posture, the careful way she positioned herself near the motorcycle for a quick escape. Diana had always been a planner, 3 steps ahead of everyone else. But she also had weaknesses. Pride, the need to be acknowledged as the smartest person in the room. If Sarah could figure out where Diana would take Emma, maybe she could use those weaknesses against her. The clock on the wall ticked another minute past. 25 hours now. Sarah pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to think like the woman she used to be, the woman who had once known Diana Reeves better than anyone. Somewhere in the maze of their shared past lay the key to finding Emma. She just had to remember how to look. The sound of Maria's phone buzzing against the kitchen counter felt like a gunshot in the morning quiet. She'd been standing there for 20 minutes, coffee growing cold in her hands, staring out at the street where she'd seen the sedan yesterday, the same dark car that had driven past 3 times in 2 days. "Hello?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Mrs. Santos, this is Detective Chen with the State Police. I'd like to speak with you about an ongoing investigation." The mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the tile floor. Coffee splashed across her bare feet, but she barely felt the heat. "I'm sorry. What investigation?" "Ma'am, are you familiar with someone named Rebecca Morse?" The name hit her like a physical blow. She gripped the counter's edge, her knuckles white. No. Should I be?" "We have reason to believe she may have made contact with you recently. She's wanted in connection with several serious crimes dating back 15 years. Maria's legs gave out. She slid down the cabinet door until she was sitting on the floor among the broken ceramic. Through the kitchen window, she could see Tommy in the backyard, tossing a ball for their neighbor's dog that had wandered over again, so innocent, so unaware that his entire world was about to collapse. "Mrs. Santos, are you there?" "Yes, I'm here. We'd like to send someone over to speak with you in person. Are you available this morning?" Every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab Tommy and disappear before the police arrived, before Rebecca could make good on whatever threat she was planning. But running would only confirm what they suspected. And she couldn't do that to Tommy again. He'd already lost one life when they'd moved here. Of course, we'll be home. After hanging up, Maria sat in the broken pieces of her morning routine and tried to think. 15 years. They were talking about 15 years ago, which meant they knew about Chicago, about Vincent Carrera and the money that had disappeared the night he died, about the fire that had consumed the warehouse and everything else. She pulled out her phone and dialed Sarah. It went straight to voicemail. "Sarah, it's me. The police are coming. I think she told them something. Call me back." But even as she left the message, Maria knew Sarah wouldn't call back. Sarah had a family to protect too, and Maria had become a liability the moment Rebecca Morse walked back into their lives. The doorbell rang exactly 43 minutes later. Maria had spent the time cleaning up the broken mug, changing into clothes that made her look like the suburban mother she'd tried to become, and sending Tommy to his friend's house down the street. She'd told him she needed to handle some boring adult business, and he'd rolled his eyes and complained about missing Saturday morning cartoons. Detective Chen was younger than Maria had expected, with sharp eyes that took in every detail of the living room. She was accompanied by an older man who introduced himself as Detective Rodriguez. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with us," Chen said, settling onto the couch. "As I mentioned on the phone, we're looking for Rebecca Morse, also known as Becca Martinez, Rebecca Moreau, and several other aliases." Maria forced herself to look confused rather than terrified. "I'm sorry, but I really don't know anyone by those names." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Mrs. Santos, we have security footage from a gas station showing you having what appeared to be an intense conversation with Miss Morse 3 days ago. Your son was present." The world tilted sideways. Security cameras. Of course there had been security cameras. How had she been so stupid? "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some mistake. 3 days ago," she pretended to think, "I did stop for gas with my son, but I didn't have any conversations with strangers." Chen pulled out a tablet and turned it toward Maria. The screen showed grainy but recognizable footage of the gas station. There was Maria's car, there was Tommy running toward the motorcycle, and there, Maria's heart stopped. There was Rebecca, face clearly visible as she turned toward the camera during their conversation. "The audio isn't clear," Rodriguez said, "but the body language suggests you two knew each other. Our investigation indicates that Rebecca Morse has been in the area for at least a week, and this is the first time we can place her interacting with anyone local." Maria stared at the screen, watching her past collide with her present in high definition. In the video, she could see the exact moment when everything changed, when Tommy mentioned the motorcycle, when Rebecca turned, when 15 years of careful hiding crumbled in a gas station parking lot. "I want to be very clear about something, Mrs. Santos," Chen said quietly. "Rebecca Morse is extremely dangerous. She's suspected in 3 murders and has connections to organized crime. If she's threatened you or your family in any way, we can provide protection." Protection. The word almost made Maria laugh. There was no protection from Rebecca. There never had been. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Maya sat across from Detective Rodriguez in the sterile interview room. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the paper cup of lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste doing nothing to calm her nerves. Through the one-way mirror she could feel eyes watching, judging, waiting for her carefully constructed world to crumble. "Let's go over this one more time, Mrs. Chen," Rodriguez said, his voice deceptively gentle. "You're telling me you've never seen this woman before yesterday at the gas station?" Maya stared at the photograph on the table between them. Valerie's mugshot from 15 years ago stared back at her, younger but unmistakably the same predatory eyes that had haunted her nightmares, the same eyes that had watched her count money in that cramped apartment while babies cried in the next room. Never, Maya whispered, the lie sitting heavy on her tongue. Rodriguez leaned forward. That's interesting, because Valerie Marsh has a very different story. She claims you two worked together, says you were involved in some pretty serious criminal activity back in Detroit. The room felt like it was closing in. Maya forced herself to breathe, to remember everything David had coached her about, if this day ever came. Deny everything, stick to the story, protect what matters most. I don't know what she's talking about, Maya said, meeting his gaze. I've lived a quiet life here. I work at the library, I volunteer at my daughter's school. You can check my records. Oh, we have. Rodriguez flipped through a file folder, clean as a whistle for the past 12 years. Before that, though, there's not much. It's like Maya Chen didn't exist before she moved to Millbrook. The detective's words hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Maya's pulse hammered in her throat, but she forced her expression to remain neutral. Years of hiding had taught her to school her features, to bury the terror deep, where it couldn't betray her. I moved here to start fresh after my husband died, she said, reciting the story she'd rehearsed countless times. Sometimes people want to leave their grief behind. Rodriguez nodded slowly, but his eyes never left her face. Grief can make people do desperate things, can make them reinvent themselves entirely. Through the small window in the door, Maya caught a glimpse of David pacing in the hallway. He'd insisted on coming, even though she'd begged him to stay away. The last thing she wanted was for him to hear the ugly truth about who she used to be, about the things she'd done to survive. Valerie mentioned something interesting, Rodriguez continued. She said you two had a falling out over money, a lot of money that went missing from their operation. Maya's blood turned to ice. The $50,000 she'd taken when she ran, money that had paid for her new identity, for Sophie's medical bills in those early years, for the down payment on their small house. Money that had bought her this life, but at what cost? I don't know anything about any money, she said, but she could hear the slight waver in her voice. Rodriguez smiled grimly. The thing about the past, Mrs. Chen, is that it has a way of catching up with us, especially when there are people who remember things differently than we do. The door opened, and another officer entered, whispering something in Rodriguez's ear. The detective's eyebrows rose slightly, and he nodded. When the officer left, Rodriguez turned back to Maya with renewed interest. Well, this is unexpected. It seems Valerie Marsh was found dead in her motel room an hour ago. Single gunshot wound to the head. Maya felt the world tilt on its axis. Valerie was dead? The woman who had held her past hostage, who had threatened to destroy everything she'd built, was gone. But instead of relief, she felt only a deeper dread settling in her bones. That's terrible, she managed. Isn't it? Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, studying her reaction. Now, where were you between midnight and 3 a.m. last night, Mrs. Chen? At home, sleeping, with my family, and they can verify that. Maya nodded, though she knew David had gotten up sometime in the night. She'd heard him moving around, assumed he was getting a glass of water or checking on Sophie. But what if he hadn't come back to bed right away? What if... No, she couldn't let her mind go there. David was gentle, kind. He'd never hurt anyone. But as she sat in that harsh room under the detective's scrutiny, Maya realized that secrets had a way of multiplying in the dark. And sometimes the people you loved most were the ones capable of the greatest surprises. I think I need a lawyer, she said quietly. Rodriguez's smile was sharp as a blade. I think that's a very good idea. The warehouse sat in industrial silence, its corrugated metal walls rising like a fortress against the grey morning sky. Sarah parked 3 blocks away, her hands trembling as she cut the engine. She'd left Emma with Mrs. Chen next door, spinning a story about a sudden work emergency that tasted like ash in her mouth. 23 years of running, and it all came down to this moment. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. DNA results expedited. Should have them by noon. She stared at the message, knowing it wouldn't matter. Whatever those results showed, the truth was already unraveling faster than she could contain it. The walk to the warehouse felt endless and too short simultaneously. Each step echoed her internal debate: turn around, grab Emma, disappear again. But Diane's message had been clear: come alone, or I start making calls to very interested parties. The side door stood slightly ajar, exactly as Diane had promised. Sarah's fingers found the pepper spray in her pocket, though she knew it was mostly psychological comfort. Diane had always been 3 steps ahead, even back when they were both someone else entirely. Inside, shafts of dusty sunlight cut through high windows, illuminating a space filled with shipping containers and abandoned machinery. The smell of motor oil and rust transported her instantly to Tony Castellano's garage, where this nightmare had begun decades ago. "You came," Diane's voice echoed from somewhere deeper in the warehouse. "I wasn't entirely sure you would." Sarah followed the sound, her footsteps careful on the concrete floor. "What choice did I have?" Diane emerged from behind a stack of pallets, looking remarkably composed for someone orchestrating what amounted to extortion. She wore dark jeans and a leather jacket that made her appear younger, more dangerous, more like the woman Sarah remembered from their shared past. "None," Diane said simply. "Just like I didn't have a choice when you left me to take the fall. That's not what happened." The words came out sharper than Sarah intended. "You know that's not what happened." "Do I?" Diane circled closer, her movements predatory. "Because my memory is quite clear. Tony's books went missing the same night you disappeared. The FBI came knocking 3 days later, and suddenly I was the only one left to answer their questions." Sarah's chest tightened. "I didn't take anything. I ran because you were scared." Diane's laugh held no warmth. "We were all scared, Sarah. Or should I say, Rebecca. That was your name then, wasn't it? Before you became this suburban soccer mom with her perfect little life. The use of her old name hit like a physical blow. Rebecca DiMarco had died the night she fled Chicago, buried under forged documents and careful reinvention. Sarah had thought she'd covered her tracks completely. "I was 19, Sarah said quietly. "I was a kid who got in over her head. So was I. But I stayed. I faced the music." Diane's eyes glittered with old anger. "Do you know what 5 years in federal prison does to a 19-year-old girl? Do you know what it's like to have nothing when you get out because everyone you trusted has vanished?" The weight of guilt Sarah had carried for over 2 decades pressed down heavier. She'd told herself that running was survival, that staying would have helped no one. But standing here, seeing the hardness that prison had carved into Diane's features, those justifications crumbled. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't buy me back those years." Diane pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over the screen. "But maybe we can discuss compensation. What do you want?" $2 million. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah felt her knees weaken. "I don't have that kind of money." "But your husband does. Michael's construction company did very well last year, didn't it? That government contract was quite lucrative." The depth of Diane's research chilled Sarah's blood. "You've been watching us." "For months. Ever since I tracked down your new identity." Diane's smile was sharp as broken glass. "It wasn't easy. You did good work disappearing, but everyone leaves traces eventually." Sarah's phone rang, startling them both. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. "Answer it," Diane commanded. "But remember, I'm listening." With shaking fingers, Sarah accepted the call. "Marcus?" "Sarah. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you. The DNA results came back, but there's something else. Something about the crime scene photos that doesn't add up. I think—" "I can't talk right now," Sarah interrupted, her eyes locked on Diane's dangerous smile. "Sarah, where are you? This is important. I think someone's been manipulating evidence." planting things to make this case look connected to your past when the line went dead. Diane held up Sarah's phone, having somehow gotten close enough to end the call without Sarah noticing. Interesting, Diane said softly. It seems Detective Peterson has been busy. Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled into her driveway, the familiar sight of home offering no comfort. The dashboard clock read 3:47 p.m. Emma would be home from school in less than 2 hours, and Detective Morrison's words echoed in her mind like a death sentence. We need you to come in tomorrow morning. There are some inconsistencies we need to discuss. She sat in the car for several minutes, watching neighbors go about their ordinary lives. Mrs. Chen watering her garden, the mailman making his rounds, children riding bikes on the sidewalk. The normalcy felt surreal, as if she were viewing it through bulletproof glass, present but forever separated from their innocent world. Inside, the house felt different. Every family photo on the mantel seemed to mock her. Every one of Emma's drawings on the refrigerator a reminder of what she stood to lose. Sarah walked through rooms that had been her sanctuary for 8 years, seeing them now as if for the last time. Her phone buzzed. A text from David, working late again. Don't wait up. Love you. The casualness of it broke something inside her. How many more of these simple, loving messages would she receive? How long before love you became I trusted you, or worse? Silence. Sarah climbed the stairs to Emma's room, drawn by an inexplicable need to be close to her daughter's world. The space smelled like strawberry lip gloss and the lavender detergent she used on the bedding. Stuffed animals lined the shelves, homework assignments covered the desk, and a half-finished friendship bracelet lay abandoned on the nightstand. She picked up the bracelet, running her fingers over the intricate pattern of purple and pink threads. Emma had been making it for weeks, determined to surprise her best friend Chloe. Such innocent concerns, whether the colors matched, if the knots were tight enough. Sarah remembered having worries like that once, a lifetime ago, before everything went wrong. The sound of a car door slamming outside made her freeze. Through Emma's window, she watched a black sedan parked across the street. The driver remained inside, but Sarah could see the silhouette clearly enough to know it wasn't a neighbor. They were watching her. Her phone rang, and she nearly dropped it before seeing the unknown number. Hello? You look upset. Valerie's voice was silk over steel, standing in that pretty pink bedroom, holding what looks like a child's toy. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She stepped away from the window, pressing her back against the wall. Where are you? Close enough. I have to say, you've built quite the picture-perfect life. Lovely home, devoted husband, precious daughter. It would be such a shame if it all came crashing down. What do you want? I want what you took from me, Sarah. 8 years of my life. 8 years in that cage while you played house with your stolen identity and blood money. Sarah's grip on the phone tightened. I never... Don't. Valerie's voice cut like a blade. Don't insult my intelligence. I know about the money that disappeared the night Marcus died. I know about the new identity, the fresh start, all of it. While I rotted in prison for his murder, you were out here spending what we earned together. I didn't kill Marcus. Neither did I, but that didn't stop them from convicting me. Your testimony made sure of that. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She had told the truth on that witness stand, or at least the truth as she understood it then. But sitting in this bedroom, surrounded by her daughter's innocent world, she could admit what she'd always suspected. Her testimony had been the final nail in Valerie's coffin. I told them what I saw. You told them what was convenient, what would get you out clean while someone else took the fall. Through the window, Sarah watched the sedan. The implications were crystal clear. Valerie knew where she lived, where her family was vulnerable. If you hurt my daughter... Hurt her? Valerie's laugh was bitter. Why would I hurt an innocent child? I'm not a monster, Sarah, despite what you let them believe about me in court. But I won't let you keep what's mine. What's yours? Freedom, a future, the chance to build something real instead of watching it through prison bars. The front door opened downstairs, and Emma's voice called out cheerfully, "Mom, I'm home!" Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She had to get Valerie away from here, away from Emma. "We need to meet, to talk. Now you want to talk? Please." The word came out as barely a whisper. Not here. Somewhere else. Emma's footsteps bounded up the stairs, getting closer. Any second now, her daughter would appear in this doorway, and Sarah couldn't bear the thought of Valerie watching that innocent face through whatever lens she was using. "The old warehouse district," Valerie said finally. "Building 47, where the trucking company used to be. You remember the place? We used to run product through there with Marcus." Sarah closed her eyes. She remembered. "1 hour," Valerie continued. "Come alone and bring what you owe me." "Mom?" Emma appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over her shoulder and a bright smile on her face. "Who are you talking to?" The line went dead. The sound of sirens grew louder as Sarah pressed herself against the cold concrete wall of the abandoned warehouse, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the grimy windows, red and blue lights painted shifting patterns across the darkness. She had maybe minutes before they found her. Her phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "Where are you? Emma keeps asking when you're coming home." The mention of her daughter sent a fresh wave of desperation through her chest. Everything she'd built, every careful lie she'd constructed to protect the life they'd made together. It was all crumbling because of one moment of recognition at a gas station. Detective Chen's voice echoed from somewhere outside the building. "We know you're in there, Sarah. Or should I say Rebecca Martinez?" The name hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't heard it spoken aloud in 8 years. 8 years since she'd walked away from everything, since she'd let everyone believe Rebecca Martinez had died in that house fire, along with Tommy Castellano. "Your fingerprints were all over that motel room where we found Diana Reeves," Chen continued, his voice growing closer. "We know what happened that night in 2015. We know about the Castellano family. We know about the money." Sarah closed her eyes, remembering Diana's face at the gas station. Older, harder, but unmistakably the same woman who had been Tommy's bookkeeper, the only other person who knew where the $3 million had really gone. Diana had recognized her too, despite the blonde hair, despite the 8 years and the suburban mother facade. The warehouse door creaked open. Footsteps echoed across the concrete floor. "I understand why you ran," Chen called out. "Tommy Castellano was a dangerous man. When his own organization put a hit out on him for skimming money, you saw your chance to disappear, take the cash he'd hidden, fake your death in the fire, start over." Sarah's breathing grew shallow. They knew more than she'd hoped, but not everything. They didn't know about the real reason she'd killed Tommy that night. Not for the money, but because she'd finally had enough of his hands on her, his threats, his promises that she'd never escape him alive. "But Diana Reeves figured out where you were," Chen continued. "She'd been looking for you for years, hadn't she, looking for her cut of that $3 million. And when your daughter mentioned motorcycles at that gas station, Diana knew she'd found the woman who'd disappeared with her retirement fund." A shadow moved past the windows. Sarah could hear at least 3 sets of footsteps now, moving systematically through the building. She thought of Emma's face that morning, bright with excitement about the school science fair next week. The normalcy of it, permission slips and lunch money and homework folders, felt like something from another life. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo from Marcus, Emma curled up on the couch with their dog, both of them waiting. The text read, "She fell asleep asking when Mommy's coming home. Please call me back. We found Diana's body yesterday." Chen's voice was closer now, maybe 1 room away. "Beaten to death with a tire iron in that motel room. Same pattern as Tommy Castellano, same signature. You've gotten better at covering your tracks, but not good enough." Sarah's hand moved to the gun in her jacket pocket, Tommy's gun, the one she'd kept all these years as insurance. She'd never planned to use it again after that night 8 years ago when she'd finally fought back, when she'd beaten him unconscious and then set the fire to cover her tracks. But Diana had forced her hand, threatening to expose everything unless Sarah handed over half the money. The footsteps stopped just outside her hiding spot. Your daughter doesn't have to lose her mother, Chen said softly, but that depends on how this ends. Emma needs you to walk out of here alive. The mention of her daughter's name from this stranger's lips sent rage flooding through her veins. These people had no right to speak of Emma, to drag her beautiful, innocent child into this mess. I've spent 8 years being a good mother, Sarah called out, her voice steadier than she felt. 8 years loving my daughter, building something real. That money gave Emma a chance at a life I never had. And she can still have that life, Chen replied. But not if you run again. Not if you make her live with the knowledge that her mother died as a fugitive. Sarah closed her eyes and saw Emma's face again, not the sleeping child from Marcus's photo, but the bright, curious girl who'd innocently mentioned motorcycles to a stranger, setting this whole nightmare in motion. The warehouse fell silent, except for the distant sirens and the sound of her own ragged breathing. The fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead as Sarah sat in the hard plastic chair, her hands trembling despite her attempts to remain calm. Detective Morrison had been questioning her for over an hour, and each passing minute felt like another nail in the coffin of the life she'd so carefully constructed. "Let's go over this one more time, Mrs. Chen," Morrison said, his voice deceptively gentle. "You're telling me you've never seen Elena Vasquez before yesterday at the gas station?" Sarah's throat felt like sandpaper. "That's correct." "Interesting, because we found something in her motel room." Morrison slid a photograph across the metal table. Sarah's blood turned to ice. It was an old Polaroid, faded and creased, showing 2 young women laughing at what appeared to be a carnival. One was clearly Elena, maybe 20 years younger. The other was Sarah, before she'd changed her hair, before she'd learned to carry herself differently, before she'd become someone else entirely. "That's not me," Sarah said, but even to her own ears, the words sounded hollow. Morrison leaned back in his chair. "DNA evidence from the motel room tells a different story. We found traces of your presence there, Mrs. Chen, hair fibers that match yours exactly." Sarah closed her eyes. She'd been so careful for so many years, but one moment of panic had unraveled everything. After Elena had approached her at the gas station, after that chilling recognition had passed between them, Sarah had waited. She'd watched Elena's car leave, followed at a distance, and discovered where she was staying. The confrontation at the Starlight Motel had been inevitable. "I want a lawyer," Sarah whispered. "That's your right," Morrison said. "But before you make that call, you should know that Elena Vasquez isn't dead." Sarah's eyes snapped open. "What?" "She's in critical condition at County General. Massive head trauma, but she's alive. If she pulls through, this could be attempted murder instead of homicide." Morrison's expression was unreadable. "Of course, if she doesn't make it." The room seemed to spin around Sarah. She'd hit Elena during their struggle, yes, but she'd thought. Elena had been so still when Sarah left the motel room. There had been so much blood. "I didn't mean for it to happen," Sarah said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. She was going to destroy everything. "My family, my children, they don't know about any of this." Morrison's pen scratched against his notepad. "Tell me about your past with Elena." Sarah's mind raced back 25 years, to a time when she'd been someone else entirely. Jessica Martinez, running with a crowd that lived on the edges of society, taking risks that seemed exciting rather than dangerous. Elena had been her closest friend, her partner in crimes that had started small but escalated quickly. "We used to steal cars," Sarah said quietly, "just for joyriding at first. But then Elena got involved with some serious people and everything changed." "What kind of serious people?" "Drug dealers, enforcers." Sarah's voice grew smaller. "There was this job Elena wanted us to do, a delivery run that would pay enough for both of us to get out of the life. But something went wrong." Morrison waited, his silence encouraging her to continue. "The people we were supposed to deliver to were undercover cops. Elena got arrested, but I managed to run. I left her there. The shame of that moment, buried for decades, came flooding back. I testified against her to save myself. She went to prison for 8 years because of me. And you disappeared. I changed everything. New name, new city, new life. I met David. We got married, had children. I thought I'd left all of that behind forever. But Elena found you." Sarah nodded miserably. She recognized Emma first, said she had my eyes. Then she saw me, and I knew she remembered everything. She said she'd been looking for me for years. What did she want? Money at first. But then she saw the house, the cars, realized how much I had to lose. She wanted more than money. She wanted me to suffer like she had. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She threatened to tell David everything, to destroy my marriage, take away my children. Morrison closed his notepad. "So you decided to kill her," Sarah said firmly. "I went to the motel to try to reason with her, to offer her whatever she wanted if she'd just leave us alone. But she laughed at me, said she'd already called David, told him to expect some interesting revelations about his wife's past. The fight had erupted then, years of buried guilt and desperation exploding into violence. Sarah could still feel the weight of the lamp in her hands, could still hear the sickening sound it made when it connected with Elena's skull. Morrison stood up. "Jessica Martinez, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Elena Vasquez." As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Sarah wondered if David had gotten Elena's call, if her children were already learning that their mother was a stranger. The fluorescent lights of the police station cast harsh shadows across Detective Sarah Chen's face as she studied the photographs spread across her desk. 20 years of cold case files, witness statements that led nowhere, and now this. A breakthrough that had walked right into her investigation wearing designer clothes and carrying secrets like loaded weapons. Claire Morrison sat in the interview room, her hands folded neatly in her lap, every inch the composed suburban mother, except for the slight tremor in her left eye. Through the one-way glass, Sarah could see her checking the clock on the wall every few minutes, waiting, calculating. "Her real name is Catherine Reeves," Officer Martinez said, sliding another file across the desk. "Disappeared from San Diego 3 weeks after the Riverside warehouse fire. Left behind a studio apartment, a waitressing job, and about $2,000 in unpaid bills." Sarah flipped through the file, comparing the old booking photo with the woman in the next room. Same bone structure, same eyes, but the Claire Morrison version had been carefully crafted, softened, refined, made respectable. What about the husband? Does he know? David Morrison married Claire in Vegas 6 months after Catherine vanished. Clean marriage certificate, social security number, the works. Either she's got connections or she's very, very smart. Both, Sarah thought, remembering the cool calculation in Claire's voice when she'd finally agreed to come in voluntarily. No lawyer yet, but that wouldn't last long. The door opened and Detective Williams entered, shaking rain from his coat. "Just got off the phone with SDPD. The warehouse fire was arson, no question. 3 dead, all identified except for one body they found in the basement. Female, mid-20s, burned beyond recognition." "Let me guess," Sarah said. "They assumed it was Catherine Reeves. Bingo. Case closed, insurance paid out, everybody moved on. Until now." Sarah stood, gathering the files. Through the glass, Claire had stopped checking the clock and was staring directly at the mirror as if she could see through it, smart enough to know she was being watched, smart enough to maintain that perfect composure even now. What about Diane Tucker? Still in county lookup. Public defenders trying to get the charges reduced, but with her record. Williams shrugged. "She's looking at serious time." The interview room smelled like industrial disinfectant and fear, though Claire Morrison showed no outward signs of the latter. She looked up as Sarah entered, offering a slight smile that probably worked wonders at PTA meetings. "Detective Chen, I hope we can resolve this quickly. My son will be wondering where I am." Sarah sat across from her, noting how Claire's gaze never wavered. "I'm sure he will, Catherine." The name hung in the air between them. Claire's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes, a door closing, walls going up. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some confusion. My name is Claire Morrison. I have identification." "I'm sure you do." Very good identification, too, the kind that takes planning, resources, connections. Sarah opened the first file. Tell me about the warehouse fire in San Diego. Tell me about the woman they found in the basement, the one they buried under your name. Claire was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the table. When she spoke, her voice was softer, almost contemplative. Sometimes people find themselves in situations where the only choice is to disappear, to become someone else entirely. And sometimes they commit murder to make that happen. Is that what you think happened? Sarah leaned forward. I think you and Diane Tucker were involved in something that went very wrong. I think when the heat got too intense, you decided to cut your losses and run. But you needed a body to take your place, didn't you? Someone no one would miss. For the first time, Claire's composure cracked slightly. A flash of something, anger, fear, maybe both, crossed her features before the mask slipped back into place. You're talking about events from 20 years ago, Detective. Even if any of this fantasy were true, what possible evidence could you have? Diane Tucker is talking. She's looking at accessory to murder charges, and she's decided she doesn't want to protect you anymore. It was a lie, but a calculated one. Sarah watched Claire's reaction carefully, saw the slight tightening around her eyes, the barely perceptible straightening of her shoulders. Diane Tucker is a drug addict with a history of mental illness. I doubt her testimony would carry much weight. Maybe not. But combined with the forensic evidence we're reprocessing, the witness statements we're reviewing, Sarah let the sentence hang. Your new life is very nice, Claire. Beautiful home, loving family, respected position in the community. Lot to lose. Claire Morrison looked at her hands, and for just a moment, Sarah caught a glimpse of the frightened young woman who had fled San Diego 20 years ago. Then the suburban mother reasserted herself, and Claire looked up with that practiced smile. I think I'd like to call my lawyer now. The abandoned warehouse loomed against the night sky like a monument to decay. Sarah pulled into the shadows between two shipping containers, her hands trembling as she cut the engine. The silence that followed felt suffocating, broken only by the distant hum of traffic on the interstate and the metallic ping of her cooling engine. She checked her phone again. No messages from David, no missed calls from Emma's school. The normalcy of her afternoon, picking up groceries, helping Emma with homework, kissing David goodbye as he left for his evening shift, felt like scenes from someone else's life. Had it really been less than 6 hours since Monica had shattered everything with 3 simple words, I found you. The burner phone Monica had pressed into her hand at the gas station buzzed with a text message, Pier 7. Come alone. You know what happens if you don't. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering the weight of the gun in her 19-year-old hands, the way Marcus Delacroix had looked at her in those final seconds, not with fear, but with something that might have been disappointment. She'd told herself for 15 years that it was self-defense, that she'd had no choice. But Monica's presence here meant someone had been asking questions, connecting dots that should have stayed scattered. The warehouse district stretched before her like a maze of rust and shadow. Pier 7 sat at the far end, where the old industrial canal met the river. She knew the area. David had brought her here once during their early dating days, showing her the abandoned lots where he and his friends used to skateboard as teenagers. The irony wasn't lost on her now. Her footsteps echoed off concrete and steel as she made her way through the complex. Security lights cast pools of harsh illumination every 50 yards, leaving vast stretches of darkness between. She kept to the shadows, muscle memory from a different life guiding her movements. Some skills never faded, no matter how desperately you wanted them to. Pier 7 emerged from the gloom like a finger pointing into black water. The old loading dock had been closed for years, its metal infrastructure skeletal against the night sky. Monica stood at the far end, her silhouette unmistakable even in the darkness. You came, Monica called out as Sarah approached. Wasn't sure you would. You didn't give me much choice. Sarah stopped 20 feet away, keeping her distance. What do you want? Monica laughed. the sound carrying across the water. "Same thing I've always wanted. Justice. Marcus Delacroix was a killer. You know that. He murdered how many people?" 7, 8, 9, Monica said quietly. "My brother was the 9th. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd known Monica back then, had worked with her in Tommy Benedetto's crew, but she'd never known about a brother. The pieces began falling into place. Monica's disappearance 3 days after Marcus's death, the way she'd vanished without a trace, the rumors that she'd gone straight, found religion, left the life behind. "You've been hunting me for 15 years, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Hunting's the wrong word. Investigating, learning. Did you know I became a private detective after I left Chicago? Specialized in cold cases. Funny how life works out." Monica took a step closer. "I spent years thinking Marcus killed Danny, followed every lead, turned over every rock. And you know what I found?" Sarah's mouth had gone dry. "What?" "Marcus Delacroix was in county lockup the night my brother died. Picked up on a parole violation 2 days earlier. Physical impossibility for him to have pulled the trigger." The pier seemed to sway beneath Sarah's feet. She thought of all the nights she'd justified what she'd done, telling herself she was protecting innocent people from a monster. All the times she'd used Marcus's reputation to quiet her conscience. "So, I started asking different questions," Monica continued. "Like who benefited from Marcus's death? Who was afraid enough of what he might reveal to kill him before his trial? And eventually, I found some very interesting financial records. Seems someone was skimming from Tommy's drug money. Someone Marcus had figured out. Someone who knew their secret was about to come to light." Sarah felt 15 years of carefully constructed lies crumbling around her. The money she'd taken, just enough to disappear, to start over, to become someone new, had seemed like such a small thing compared to taking a life. She'd told herself she deserved it after everything she'd been through. "You killed him to keep him quiet," Monica said. "And you let me believe for 15 years that the man I murdered my brother also died that night. Do you have any idea what that kind of guilt does to a person?" "Monica, my brother was 19 years old. He'd never hurt anyone in his life. He was trying to get out, just like you eventually did. But someone needed a scapegoat for their theft, and Danny was convenient." The sound of approaching engines cut through the night air. The warehouse smelled of rust and abandonment, dust motes dancing in shafts of light that pierced through broken windows. Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched Emma close, feeling her daughter's small body shake against her chest. Across the cavernous space, Detective Martinez kept her weapon trained on Victoria, who stood perfectly still, that same predatory smile playing at her lips. "It's over, Victoria," Martinez called out, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "We found everything. The financial records, the witness statements from Portland. We know about the trafficking operation, about what you did to those girls." Victoria laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. "You think you understand? You have no idea what those girls were before I gave them purpose. They were nothing. Street trash. I gave them value." Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. The woman she'd once trusted, once worked alongside, revealed herself as something monstrous. "They were children," Sarah whispered, her voice gaining strength. "They were just children, like my Emma." "Your precious Emma." Victoria's eyes glittered with malice. "Do you know what it's been like? Watching you play house? Watching you pretend to be some suburban soccer mom when I know what you really are? You were mine, Sarah. My best girl. My partner." "I was never your partner," Sarah said firmly, stepping slightly forward despite Martinez's warning gesture. "I was your victim too. I was 17 when you found me, 17 and scared and alone." The admission hung in the air like a confession. Emma looked up at her mother with wide, confused eyes, but Sarah pressed on. This was her daughter's truth to know, her burden to finally share. "I was trapped for 3 years, Sarah continued, her voice steadying with each word. 3 years of hell until I found the courage to run. I testified against the operation, helped put 12 people behind bars. But you slipped away, didn't you? You always were good at disappearing when things got hot. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. You destroyed everything I built, cost me millions. Did you think I'd just forget? Did you think you could steal that money and start fresh without consequences? Martinez stepped closer, her weapon never wavering. The money you stole was evidence, Sarah. We know about the account you emptied before you testified. That's why you were able to disappear so completely. Sarah nodded, shame and relief warring in her chest. I took what I could. Blood money from selling those girls. I used it to buy my freedom, to build a life where Emma could be safe. I'm not proud of it, but I won't apologize for protecting my daughter. Our daughter, Victoria hissed, and the words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Emma's grip tightened around Sarah's neck. Mommy? It's okay, baby, Sarah whispered, but her world was tilting. The timeline, the timing of her escape, the reason Victoria had been so determined to find her, it all crystallized with horrible clarity. She doesn't know, does she? Victoria's smile returned, cruel and triumphant. Poor little Emma, wondering why Daddy never calls, why Mummy never talks about him. Should I tell her about the night you were so desperate to escape that you— Stop! Sarah's voice cut through the air like a blade. Don't you dare, don't you poison her with this. Martinez had been listening to the exchange with growing understanding. Victoria Chen, you're under arrest for human trafficking, kidnapping, extortion, and about a dozen other charges. You have the right to remain silent. But Victoria wasn't finished. She pulled something from her jacket, not a weapon but a photograph. Even from across the warehouse, Sarah could see it was old, faded. Two young women standing together, one dark-haired and defiant, one blonde and terrified. Sarah recognized her younger self immediately. Look how scared you were, Victoria called out mockingly. Look how much you needed me. You can pretend all you want, but I made you who you are. I gave you strength. I gave you everything. You gave me nightmares, Sarah replied quietly. You gave me scars. You gave me a lifetime of looking over my shoulder, but you didn't make me strong. Getting away from you made me strong. Building a life with my daughter made me strong. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder. Backup was arriving, but Victoria seemed unconcerned. She dropped the photograph, letting it flutter to the concrete floor. This isn't over, she said simply. But as Martinez moved to cuff her, as the warehouse filled with the sound of car doors slamming and officers shouting instructions, Sarah realized it was over. The fear that had lived in her chest for 8 years was finally lifting. Emma was safe, the truth was out, and for the first time since that morning at the gas station, Sarah Whitmore could breathe.